Hey again, I'm Jeff DeRiso and welcome to another edition of Mind Hack. Today on Mind Hack, family of CIA consultant sues Iran over his disappearance, using artificial intelligence to conserve the natural world, and Elon Musk launches a venture to merge AI with the human brain. We begin today by looking at an article in the March 21st, 2017 edition of the New York Times by Barry Meyer. The article is entitled, "Family of CIA Consultant Sues Iran Over His Disappearance." The article begins, "The family of a part-time consultant for the CIA, who vanished a decade ago in Iran, filed a lawsuit on Tuesday against that country, claiming that it had used a campaign of deception and lies to conceal its role in the imprisonment." For those of you who are unfamiliar with the story of Robert Levenson, it's outlined in Barry Meyer's book entitled Missing Man, the American Spy Who Vanished in Iran. Bob Levenson is a former DEA and FBI agent who turned private investigator. He disappeared on March 9, 2007, when visiting Iran's Kish Island, while supposedly researching a cigarette smuggling case. Barry Meyer points out that he investigated this cigarette smuggling angle and found it to be a red herring. What he also found, through sources within Bob Levenson's family, was evidence that Levenson was working as a consultant for the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. Furthermore, Meyer discovers that Robert Levenson was last seen at a hotel called Maryam on Kish Island, where he was attempting to recruit a US-born assassin to be a CIA asset inside of Iran. Bob Levenson has not been seen since, with the exception of a video released in 2010, where he pleaded for the United States to rescue him from captivity, and some photographs in 2011 which portrayed Levenson in a Guantanamo-style jumpsuit and had a similar message. What Barry Meyer points out is the moral ambiguity on both sides of this story. While all of this is going on, the government of Iran is denying any knowledge of Levenson's capture whatsoever. And Meyer says that there is evidence to conclude that that could not be the case. However, on the other hand, Meyer also points out that the cigarette smuggling investigation was a cover story, and that the Federal Bureau of Investigations has declined to give Levenson's family any information about their ongoing investigation into his disappearance. Further adding insult to injury, a recent negotiation by the Obama administration to release American hostages from Iran did not include Robert Levenson. Meyer even goes so far as to conclude that Levenson and his family are part of collateral damage of the United States intelligence strategy that cares more about achieving their agendas in foreign policy than it does about giving closure to a family of a man who served his country for 33 years. Meyer's main question is, why? Why can't Robert Levenson's family know the truth about his capture and possibly his subsequent death? Fast forward to today, when the lawyer for the Levenson family, David McGee, has brought a lawsuit in federal court on behalf of the family, insisting that Iran, through their campaign of disinformation about their knowledge of Levenson, has created emotional distress for the family, though spokespeople for the Iranian government have still declined to comment. The lawsuit asserts that the FBI has concluded that the hostage videotape and photographs, neither of which provided clues about his captor's identity, were part of an Iranian attempt to create a false scenario that Robert Levenson was being held by some other country. Lindsey Rahm, an FBI spokeswoman, declined to comment on any involvement of Iranian officials in Mr. Levenson's detention and capture. Levenson's wife, Christine, filed a Freedom of Information Act request seeking FBI documents related to the investigation. But her request was denied by the FBI, stating that, as a matter of policy, the Bureau does not release documents about cases that are, quote, ongoing. And that's where the moral ambiguity is really highlighted, I think. there seems to be evidence of deception within the Iranian government, there's also clear evidence of a cover-up on the part of the US government, and I don't really think that that's fair to the family of this man who gave his service to this country. I don't think that the family of this man should be given the runaround when it comes to getting closure on the disappearance of someone who they loved. In my view, there seems to be a tendency of US officials and media spokespeople promoting the idea that only foreign countries use tactics of disinformation and deception to wage warfare on their enemies. So you may be asking, does the United States have a history of using tactics of disinformation and psychological warfare on their enemies? That question brings us to today's Mind Hack Flashback. Today we flash back to September 1950. A group called the Hukbalahap Rebellion, or Huk Rebellion, is threatening the power of the US-backed government in the Philippines. Then Filipino President Elpidio Quirino personally requests the presence of Air Force officer and OSS operative Ed Lansdale. Lansdale, along with Filipino Defense Minister Ramon Magsaysay, created a psychological operations division called the Civil Affairs Office in order to use unconventional psychological tactics to quell the Huk Rebellion. One such tactic played on the Huk rebels' belief in a vampire-like creature called the Aswang. In his memoir entitled In the Midst of Wars, An American's Mission to Southeast Asia, Lansdale recounts the operation. A combat Psy-War squad was brought in. It planted stories among town residents of an Aswang living on the hill where the Huks were based. 2 nights later, after giving the stories time to circulate among Huk sympathizers in the town and make their way up to the hill camp, the Psy-War squad set up an ambush along a trail used by the Huks. When a Huk patrol came along the trail, the ambushers silently snatched the last man of the patrol, their move unseen in the dark night. They punctured his neck with 2 holes, vampire fashion, held the body up by the heels, drained it of blood, and put the corpse back on the trail. When the Huks returned to look for the missing man and found their bloodless comrade, every member of the patrol believed that the Aswang had got him, and that one of them would be next if they remained on that hill. When daylight came, the whole Huk squadron moved out of the vicinity. This tactic was one of many psychological tactics used by Lansdale and his Civil Affairs Office in the Philippines. Lansdale went on to continue this type of work in Vietnam and then Cuba. He is referred to by former CIA Director William Colby as one of the greatest spies in history. And that is today's Mind Hack Flashback. Our next article today was brought to my attention by Newsbud analyst Eric Moshe, who has a great collection of articles posted on Newsbud that I encourage you to check out. The article is in Atlantic Magazine, published on March 24th, 2017. The title is Artificial Intelligence, the Park Rangers of the Anthropocene. Now, if you're like me, you didn't know what the word Anthropocene meant, so I had to look it up. Anthropocene refers to the period of time during which human activity has been the dominant influence on the climate and the environment, though I'm not sure how one would go about proving that humans are the dominant influence. The article begins by describing a project where autonomous killer robots are involved in a conservation effort to save the Great Barrier Reef. Their target is the crown of thorns starfish, which is seen as a threat to the barrier reef. A team of Australian scientists has developed intelligent underwater robots called COTSbots that can lethally inject these starfish without human intervention. While the author of this article points out that this effort to save the Great Barrier Reef will probably be unsuccessful, he's interested in this approach of using autonomous artificial intelligence in efforts to conserve the environment. He says, the work of conservationists typically involves reducing human influence, but all of these measures involve human action. The COTSbots are different. They're designed ultimately to operate without us. The article then goes on to talk about an intriguing thought experiment paper, which was created by a landscape architect, a historian, and an ecologist, entitled Designing Autonomy: Opportunities for New Wildness in the Anthropocene. They have taken this idea to its logical extreme by creating what they call a wildness creator, a hypothetical artificial intelligence that would autonomously protect wild spaces. This machine would develop its own strategies independent of human influence that it would then implement in order to serve its goal of protecting nature. In their view, this paper is not meant to promote an idea which is necessarily technologically or financially feasible at this time, but simply to explore the idea and also its ethical implications. The ecologist of the group, Ellis, elaborates on this point. He says, when people try to maintain natural places, there's a tendency to end up over-curating them. And he points to the implementation of the hotspot strategy in Australia as an example of this over-curation. The author of the article, Ed Yong, then goes on to elaborate on the hypothesis of how artificial intelligence could be a revolutionary innovation in the field of conservation. He cites the example of Google's AlphaGo system, which was able to defeat the best human Go players in the world because it made moves that no human would ever think to make. And that is exactly the reason why Earl Ellis, the ecologist of the group, is extremely excited about this possibility. There is already some research moving in this direction. The landscape architect of the group, Bradley Cantrell, is already working on prototypes for intelligently controlling river systems. He wants to create a more dynamic system involving sensors and structures that could more subtly manipulate the flow of water and the pattern of sediment. He says the idea isn't to build one solution, but something that constantly updates itself. The author then lists several other technologies that can be in the category of using artificial intelligence for conserving nature. Drones that can plant trees, artificial pollinators, swarms of oceanic vehicles for cleaning up oil spills, or an autonomous weed-punching farm bot. He also lists geoengineering in this category. Now, this is where I kind of think that we should be a little more careful in bundling certain technologies into certain baskets and labeling them green, and therefore possibly ignoring the risks that they pose to our human systems. Specifically, I'm concerned that the practice of geoengineering, which is an attempt to counter, quote, climate change by manipulating the environment, may have many risks that outweigh the possible benefits. Although geoengineering is framed as an attempt to counter climate change, often left out of the discussion is the fact that governments and corporations have been using weather modification as a tool since the 1950s. Another ecologist named Eric Higgs, quoted in the article, points out that conservationists have learned the hard way that protecting nature is only possible if people are invested in caring for their land or protecting local animals. And I think that's a good point. The article concludes stating that the idea of fully removing ourselves from nature is obviously unachievable. And then Laura Martin, the historian in the study, says something that I think is really important. She says, instead, we should be thinking critically and carefully about how to coexist with other species. What I think Martin is advocating here is more of a systemic approach of looking at our human relationship with the environment and how we can adjust our human systems to better create a coexistence between ourselves and nature. So my proposal upon reading this article is that there are two sections of it. There's the autonomy and there's the artificial intelligence. Now, the artificial intelligence is what made it possible for Google's AlphaGo system to come up with a strategy that no human could come up with. If a computer program can come up with a strategy for helping us coexist with the environment that we haven't previously thought of, that's a good thing. Where I'm concerned is with the implementation. If that implementation is an autonomous thing that no human agency is required for, then what is to stop the computer from making the decision that humans are the problem and that humans must be destroyed? Many people in the comments section of this article made that very point, and I think their concern is definitely a valid one. My proposal would be a separation between the strategy and the implementation. If the artificial intelligence system can come up with a new strategy that we can never think of, and then us as human beings can implement that strategy, that takes away the fear factor of autonomous robots making decisions that we have no say in. For me, that type of compromise is something that would get us a little closer to a positive outcome for this technology. The last article I want to look at today is published in The Verge on March 27, 2017. The title reads, Elon Musk launches Neuralink, a venture to merge the human brain with AI. The article talks about the public announcement of a new company by SpaceX and Tesla founder Elon Musk. The company, according to the article, is centered on creating devices that can be implanted in the human brain, with the eventual purpose of helping human beings merge with software and keep pace with advancements in artificial intelligence. These enhancements, the article goes on, could improve memory or allow for more direct interfacing with computing devices. A few things I noticed just in this very brief intro. What particularly concerns me is the use of the word helping human beings, as if the author assumes that that's something that we all want. And further, calling them enhancements is another way to give them a positive association in our minds, when the technology is still in its infancy stage. The article quotes Elon Musk talking to a crowd in Dubai. He says, "Over time, I think we will probably see a closer merger of biological intelligence and digital intelligence. It's mostly about the bandwidth," he said, "the speed of the connection between your brain and the digital version of yourself, particularly output." The article then goes on to point out that these types of interfaces are very rare, except in the medical field, where they are used as a last resort to combat certain neurodegenerative diseases. In my opinion, this medical last resort application is actually a possibly positive application for this technology. The reason they're a last resort is that the surgery on the human brain is incredibly dangerous. This has not stopped a surge of interest among Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. A recent tech startup, Kernel, founded by Brian Johnson, says that it is working toward reversing the effects of neurodegenerative diseases and eventually making our brains faster and smarter and more wired. Johnson says Kernel's goal is to work with the brain the same way we work with complex biological systems like biology and genetics. However, neuroscience researchers are a little more skeptical about the reality of implementing something like this. These researchers say that our understanding about how neurons in the human brain communicate is actually very limited at this point. Then there's the idea of getting people to volunteer to have electronic implants placed inside their brains. Blake Richards, a neuroscientist and assistant professor at the University of Toronto, says, "People are only going to be amenable to the idea of an implant if they have a very serious medical condition they might get help with. Most healthy individuals are uncomfortable with the idea of having a doctor crack open their skull." So what I'm concerned with is that, again, we're seeing Elon Musk, who cultivates an image of being extremely cautious when it comes to the development of artificial intelligence technology, seeming to frame this issue as some sort of race between artificial intelligence and humans. The result of thinking about this as a race is that we may rush to make some hasty decisions. And I think this merging of the human brain and the digital brain is not a decision that should be taken lightly and rushed into. I also don't think that it necessarily has to be the inevitable future for humanity. And I think that people who promote that idea, like Musk seems to be doing here, are limiting the role of human free will in deciding what our future is going to be. What concerns me is that this technology, similar to some of the ones that we talked about in the previous article, are lacking an understanding of the holistic system that they operate within. These technologies seem to be addressing the symptoms of problems rather than the causes of problems. Like the historian Laura Martin pointed out in the previous article, We as humans have to step up and take part and participate in molding and shaping how we want this technology to interact with us and our children in the future. Maybe some of you out there think that I'm being overly paranoid about this. And if you do think that, please tell me why. I'm certainly open to refining my point of view further on issues like this. That's it for today's edition of Mind Hack. Thanks for watching, and please continue the discussion further in the comments section below. I'm Jeff DeRiso, and I'll see you next time.
For just a small subscription fee, you can become a member of the Newsbud community and help keep this website running. Your subscription will provide you with full community access to exclusive content, including videos and articles from Newsbud's team of experts and analysts, as well as a members-only monthly newsletter from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds. Sign up today for full access at newsbud.com.